Cohen.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank Mr. Scott, the gentleman from Virginia, for the time. And I want to thank Mr. Smith, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, for the way he runs his committee. He's an outstanding chairman and a gentleman. And I appreciate the fact that in this bill, which Mr. Scott has given much of the argument that I otherwise would have made about its failings, that Mr. Smith did accept an amendment to take the possession charges out of it. So possession of drugs is not in it, and that was an improvement. But nevertheless, one of the amendments that we did discuss in committee that still bothers me is that the activities could have been entirely legal in the country where they took place. Amsterdam or Holland. Holland is the country which I was thinking of, the Netherlands, and we discussed it in committee. Mr. Scott mentioned medical marijuana being legal in Canada as well as also in Israel. But a lot of drugs are legal in transactions in Holland. And if two Americans talked on the phone about going to Holland and buying some marijuana and maybe trading it with somebody else in Holland where it would be legal, it would be a violative of the law in the United States based on this particular statute. And that's what's called an overly broad law, when it captures conduct that really isn't intended to do. I don't think, and I would hope, that the people that voted for this didn't intend for it to criminalize speech when the actions in the country where the act took place was legal. I hope they wouldn't have been thinking that. And on the Judiciary Committee, we should be very, very circumscribed in what we pass, because we're taking people's liberty from them. And liberty is one of the words inscribed up here, I think, in front of the panel. It's one of the things America holds so dear. This Thursday, we're going to be celebrating, or some of us will be celebrating in some ways, we'll be observing regardless, the 220th passage of the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights gives people the freedom of speech and quite a few freedoms from government oppression and government activities. To suggest that this is a loophole, I think, is a mistake. I think it was not intended by this Congress to criminalize behavior, particularly behavior that was legal in the country where it took place. In this situation that Mr. Smith describes, where some people got together in Miami to discuss drugs from Colombia that were flown from Venezuela to France and purchased in the Netherlands and Italy and elsewhere, I don't think they were in Miami because they thought that was a loophole. I think they were in Miami because they liked Miami. And why wouldn't you? Miami's a great place. They weren't there because it was a loophole. They just happened to be there. And I don't think anybody foresaw that as being illegal conduct. They could have discussed that in Paris or in Caracas or anywhere else. It didn't facilitate the crime per se. And I don't think that necessarily, and what they did was illegal in all those different countries, and they could have been prosecuted there. I would submit to you also that this nation and this world almost came to its knees because of derivatives and financial instruments created here in the United States, created here, not just talked about in Wall Street, but it had a global effect because those derivatives affected banks in Europe and all around the world. And as we almost came to our knees because of the criminal activities of people making lots of money with greed, gecko greed, other people around the world as well economically. But we're not rushing here to criminalize talks between people in Wall Street and people in Paris about derivatives, about subprime loans, about ways to make money at the expense of poor people and possibly bring the world to its knees economically. That we're not discussing, but we are discussing the possibility of putting people in jail for going to Amsterdam and talking about buying some marijuana. Something smells foul, and that's why I oppose the bill. And I yield back the remainder of my time.